Hi, I'm Lee Strobel. Welcome to Faith Under Fire. One of the biggest battlegrounds of politics and religion is the role of church and state. Did the Founding Fathers lay the foundation of our nation on biblical principles and values? Or was the Constitution purposely written as a godless document that would forever separate government and religion? We'll investigate this issue with David Barton, who leads an organization called Wall Builders, has written several books, including The Myths of Separation and Original Intent, and was named by Time magazine as one of America's 25 most influential evangelicals. Opposing him is author and feminist Laurie Gaylor, president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation and editor of Free Thought Today. David, let me start with you. Is America a Christian nation? And if so, what exactly does that mean?
Well, you first have to define it. The Founding Fathers made a big distinction between America as a Christian nation and Europe as a Christian nation. John Jay, the guy who did the Federalist Papers, John Quincy Adams, etc., said we were an enlightened, rational, civilized Christian nation. So we're not a theocracy. The state doesn't run the church does not wield the sword. You don't have to be a Christian to live here. But from the standpoint of us being a Christian nation, according to their definition, founded largely by Christians, largely with the great respect to Christian principles. And by the way, it is not an insult to the Founding Fathers to say Judeo-Christian principles, because they did that. They were great lovers of the Hebrews. A lot of Founding Fathers were Jews, so we'd call it Judeo-Christian principles. But if you look at signers of the Declaration of Independence, they said America's a Christian nation. So were we? Yes. The last point is, are we? There's 4 polls done recently. There's ABC, there's Gallup, there's Pew, and there's City University of New York. Between 82 and 88% of Americans still call themselves Christians. If you looked at another nation and said 82, 88% are Jews, we'd say it's a Jewish nation. 82 to 88% Muslims, we'd say it's a Muslim nation. America's 82 to 88% professing Christians. I would say that qualifies for a Christian nation.
Okay, Laurie, I have a sneaky suspicion you would disagree.
Yes, I think that Mr. Barton's organization is a misnomer. He is not a wall builder. He wants to tear down the wall of separation between church and state, which our Founding Fathers very wisely erected. And what he has not pointed out, of course, is that our U.S. Constitution is godless. It is secular. If we are a Christian nation, why doesn't our Constitution say that we're a Christian nation? Of course we're not a Christian nation. It is not a test of citizenship or a test of public office. You can believe anything you like in our country or nothing at all, and that is a fundamental pinnacle of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter whether a majority is Christian or not. It doesn't matter whether a majority of the Founding Fathers were Christian or not. They adopted a secular, godless Constitution, history's first secular Constitution, and we should be promoting it, not tearing it down.
Okay, let's ask Dave. Dave, is the Constitution of the United States a godless document, as Laurie said?
Not by any means. There's 5 reasons within the Constitution that it's not a godless document. The first reason starts in Article 7 of the Constitution, where it directly ties itself to the Declaration of Independence. The Founding Fathers who signed both documents, people like George Read and others, said that the Constitution did not replace the Declaration. The Declaration set forth the principles. The Constitution set forth the operation. Declaration acknowledges God 4 times. Article 7 of the Constitution ties the Constitution directly to the Declaration. Point 2, Article 2 of the Constitution gives us what's called the Sundays Accepted Clause. The courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, said that a Sunday Accepted Clause proves the Christianity of the Constitution. There is no religion in the world that has a Sunday Sabbath except for Christianity. Final point I'd make is political scientists have made the point. They've studied the founding era. The most frequently cited document around the Constitution was the Bible. George Washington, Alexander Hamilton said that separation of powers came out of Jeremiah 17:9. We have the 3 branches of government from Isaiah 33:22. If Laurie would care to look, Article 3, Section 3, Paragraph 1, if she would then read Deuteronomy 17:6, she'd see it's the same wording.
Come off
Paragraph 2 is exactly... but you haven't read it, Laurie. Hey, this is not my opinion.
Of course I've read the Constitution.
What about you haven't read the Bible.
And the separation of powers?
If you read the Bible, you would see the same language as in the Constitution.
Okay, let's say Laurie, go ahead and respond, Laurie. You just presented a lot of evidence of ties here.
I think there was a great deal of verbiage, and you will note that in that verbiage, Mr. Barton at no time said there is a God in the Constitution. That's because it is godless. There is no reference to religion in it except exclusionary. There are oaths of office in the Constitution for the presidency, and it explicitly says the oath, there is no so help you God. That was a custom that was added later. We have a secular
No, it was added by
document,
George Washington.
and
It was
this
not
is a
added later.
theocrat. This is
Every
someone
single
who
president
wants
has used that.
to tear down the wall
It
of
was not
separation
added
of
later.
church and state. He wants to distort history. By the way, the Treaty of Tripoli that was formulated under George Washington and signed by John Adams said that the United States was in no way a Christian nation. How about that? I think that it's important to reveal that this Mr. Wall Builder was hired by the GOP to campaign in churches last year, to go to churches and spread disinformation and to promote the Republican Party. You have a theocrat here. He wants to mix church and state, and he has an agenda, and he has caused a great deal of harm. He has put out bogus quotes in his original book and his original video that we see every day in letters to the editor.
Okay, Andy Laurie, hold it right there. Those are some serious allegations. When we get back, we're going to hear Dave's response. Stay with us. We're back talking about whether America is a Christian nation. I'm with David Barton from Wall Builders and Annie Laurie Gaylor from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Now, before we went to the break, Annie Laurie charged Dave with making some bogus quotes. Dave, how do you respond to that?
I'll be happy to. Number one, you got to wait.
Yes, tell us about those, Mr. Barton.
Would you let me tell him? You asked me to, so back off. Number one, you've gotten away from the substance that Lee asked about. Now you're into name calling. Number two, there is never a bogus quote I've used. Every quote I've used has a footnote to it. I made the decision that I would no longer quote professors. I would quote original documents. Now you go get that book. You look at every quote. It has a footnote to it. But the problem was I didn't want to quote professors from 1950. I wanted to quote founding fathers. Now, you brought up the issue of the Treaty of Tripoli between George Washington and John Adams. Here's the original state papers that contain it. And people like you stop after the first clause. It's treaty with a Muslim nation. It says the government of the United States is in no sense founded on the Christian religion. That's where you stop. The rest of the clause says, as it has an inherent hostility toward the Muslim religion. They said, guys, we're not Europe. We're not Spain. We're not Portugal. We're not Italy. We don't hate you because you're Muslims. We're not that kind of a Christian nation. It does not say we're not a Christian nation. It says we're not a Christian nation that has an inherent hatred toward Muslims. That's a big difference, but you guys put a period in the middle of the sentence. This is the original treaty right here. I mean, that's what it says.
Let's let her respond. Go ahead, Annie Laurie.
There is no argument that he has made that this is a Christian nation, that our government is Christian. The only argument he has come up with is that a majority of people profess some form of Christianity. A majority of Americans, by the way, do not go to church. But that would be like saying this is a white nation because a majority of Americans are white or not of other races. Why would somebody want to make a statement like that?
You resort to racism when you can't win on substance.
What does it matter, David, if indeed we have these Christian roots? How should it influence society today?
There's several things. Number one, a theocracy is God ruling a nation. I don't think God's going to come down and run on any ballot. Number two, I'm not in favor of abolishing the Constitution. I work really hard for that document. I like that document, so that's nonsense. I don't want a theocracy. But I do want the ability of the people to have their roots expressed.
Okay, Annie Laurie, what's your fear over all of this?
My fear is that people like Mr. Barton have a very obvious agenda, which is that they want to distort the history of the founding of our country and our Constitution. They're unhappy with the fact that it is secular, and they are clutching at straws and making bogus arguments, and it's disinformation. It's very harmful. The quotes, these bogus quotes that Mr. Barton had floated around for years, are still out there on the internet and in letters to the editor, misquoting Jefferson and Madison and you name it, and distorting people's perception of history. And I think that if he were honest, he would be saying, you know, I support separation of church and state. I want to make sure that I do not distort the record. And I think it's interesting that he hasn't commented on the fact that he was paid by the GOP to go preach in churches. Now, what were you doing there, Mr. Barton?
Well, number one, you get your facts wrong. I was paid by the GOP to go do rallies. I didn't preach in churches for the GOP. Whether you believe it or not, I do believe in some form of separation of church and state, but not a secularization of society. I don't want the church running government. I don't want the government running the church. But I don't think that that means we have a secular society. So that's where you're wrong. That is nonsense. Yes, I was paid by the GOP. I did rallies across the country. But I was not paid to go into churches, and that's a long way off. And by the way, I challenge you to find any bogus quote that I've used that you claim that does not have a footnote documented back to a source.
What is secular? When you say a secular country, David, what is it you don't like about that idea?
We have the greatest freedom in the world because we've been a Christian nation, but not a coercive Christian nation. I believe the truth wins out. I believe in free speech. I support her right to be wrong. I think she's wrong. I support her right to say what she wants to say. I don't have trouble with that. I have trouble when she tells me that I cannot have my right of free speech, the kind of suits she's been involved with on their website. That doesn't represent mainstream America. That's a very intolerant view of my beliefs. I'll let her have her beliefs, but I don't think she should force hers on me.
Okay, Laurie, are you intolerant?
No, the Freedom from Religion Foundation has been leading the way in challenging President Bush's faith-based initiative, and our most recent lawsuits, which we have won, have stopped funding a profoundly sectarian, exclusionary organization such as Mentor Kids in Arizona, in which the mentors had to be church-going, fundamentalist Christians who signed a mission statement that they believed only in creationism. And we stopped that funding of federal money for faith-based purposes. But
Annie Laura earlier brought up the Treaty of Tripoli. A treaty she didn't bring up was Jefferson's treaty with the Kaskaskia Indians. Here it is, 1803. Jefferson did this treaty, signed by him at the bottom. In this treaty, Thomas Jefferson, now Jefferson gave federal money to pay for missionaries to evangelize the Indians, and Jefferson gave federal funds to build churches so that when the Indians became evangelized, they'd have a place to worship. That's not faith-based funding. That's direct federal funding by Thomas Jefferson. She needs to read the other treaties in that book. She's got part of one treaty, but not the others.
Thomas Jefferson, who said we should question with boldness even the existence of a God, who rejected the Bible, who cut it up because he did not believe most of it was the words of Jesus, who said it was like going through a sewer to find a gem, to find something good in the Bible, and who said that the First Amendment erects a wall of separation between church and state. Thomas Jefferson, who was the person who demanded that we have a Bill of Rights. He was somebody who ardently
Jefferson
believed
was
in
in France. Jefferson said he did nothing with the Bill of Rights. Thomas Jefferson was not in the nation when the Constitution was done and the Bill of Rights was done. He himself said he had nothing to do with it. He himself said he had nothing to do with the Bill of Rights.
I think Annie, Laurie, maybe you're right. We are in two nations here, at least two very strong viewpoints on both sides of this issue. Thank you both for coming on Faith Under Fire and expressing your perspective on this thing.
Our pleasure, Lee. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Annie, Laurie, as well. We're going to be right back on Faith Under Fire.